Welcome to a virtual tour of Gravel Gardens, Juneton. Carol and I have been here over 40 years. We're still finding lots of work to do as we learn how to garden in this difficult country. We're extending the garden, replacing plants and broadening our horizons. We're starting near the rose garden. There are a few non-natives close to the house and now approaching what we call Hakea Walk. Some of the plants here have been here for many years, but I put the path in during the first lockdown earlier in the year. Coria glabra on the left, a few wattles down the track, quite a lot of little hakeas that haven't developed much yet, and coming into view is Grevillea leucopteris, a grafted plant, been here 2 years. This is its first year of proper flowering. As you can see, it's a pretty difficult country. We called it Gravel Gardens for a reason. Lots of gravel, clay, and what we call conglomerate rock. It consists of pebbles set in rock like concrete. It's much harder and more brittle and heavier than normal concrete. Coming to the end of Hakea Walk, swinging round to the bottom edge. Couple more wattles. And Carol's herb garden in the drum. Now we swing past Hakea petiolaris for a second look at Grevillea leucopteris before we move on to another part of the garden. As we approach the hothouse and vegetable garden, we pass Acacia aspera, a local wattle with coarse, rough leaves, but is very dense, rounded shrub. Looking up to the hothouse where I do some propagation, we can see some of the plants outside. And inside you can see the cuttings and seeds under propagation, and some of the cuttings that I've potted up once they've struck roots. Here's a tray of Grevillea robusta seedlings. Hopefully you'll be able to do some grafting in a couple of months. And a few pots of eucalyptus seedlings germinating. And some of the plants that I've grown and potted up. Tube stock, some grafted grevilleas, and other plants in pots. As we move from the hothouse, we walk down past the 2 wicking beds that I grow vegetables in. Ian Evans and his crew constructed these for me. We can see the broad bean crop, rhubarb, silver beet, and some climbing peas. We're now walking past Melaleuca decussata, commonly called totem poles, a local Melaleuca in the area. We're now approaching the bottlebrush garden. The first plant is Callistemon pinifolius, a green-flowered bottlebrush. Beautiful flowers and prickly foliage. Further along, a couple of plants of Melaleuca fulgens, two different coloured versions. Almost finished flowering now though. Another local Melaleuca is Melaleuca wilsonii. There's a couple of little plants here that I put in a couple of years ago. Flowering for the first time and almost finished though. And behind the tree trunks here, there's a mature plant of Melaleuca wilsonii that's finished flowering. A local Grevillea alpina, tiny white flowers on this one, but there's red and yellow and orange versions all over the block. And coming up now we see Melaleuca lateritia, or robin redbreast. And Callistemon phoenicius, a brilliant bottle brush, a great one to have in your garden. Now we're going to circumnavigate the roundabout garden, starting with Hakea verrucosa, Acacia williamsonii, a tall Eucalyptus viridis, the green mallee, with a Pandaria pandarana, cream and burgundy flowers right up the top. 3 small King Spark special callistemons. A grafted Grevillea insignis subspecies Elliotii. Astatia fascicularis. Some self-sown acacias and grevilleas. A grafted Grevillea johnsonii. Grevillea sericea. Some self-sown Crowea exhalatas. And back to Hakea verrucosa at the start. On the other side of the roundabout, you can see a lot of the conglomerate rocks I've laid over the end of the garden bed, and then a water feature. Behind you can see a very dense thicket of Acacia deanii, originally planted one plant. It's suckered under the ground and forms a dense thicket. You'll have heard of Cameron Corner on the border of South Australia, New South Wales and Queensland. Well, coming up is our version of Cameron Corner, planted in memory of our son. So it's a very difficult spot to grow things. Quite a few young hakeas seem to be doing okay so far. A bird bath. Eremophila calahabdos. A Pandarana climbing the tree. It hasn't flowered yet, so we don't know what colour it is. And a couple of Acacia Maranthophoras. Very wispy plant, lovely in flower in the spring. Now we move on to the driveway garden. Grevillea Bonaccord. Some Calothamnus in the background. Some more Grevilleas. A pig face. Another Grevillea Johnsonii. Acacia Glaucoptera. Some more self-sown Grevilleas, Hardenbergias, and a couple more Grevilleas. Naturally occurring finger flower. Further along the drive we see Melaleuca elliptica, the granite Melaleuca, or granite bottlebrush. Adjacent to it is Melaleuca linearifolia, or snow in summer. It's not in flower yet, but is in bud. A couple of clystemons, and then a magnificent Eucalyptus citriodora, the lemon-scented gum we planted over 40 years ago. Across the drive we see another Calothamnus, been there many years, and behind it the native Frangipani, Hymenosperm flavum. Further around we see a little hill garden with two prostrate acacias. I can't tell you the name of the first one, but the one on the left is Acacia lasiocarpa prostrate. On the stump we can see the bluebell climber. It used to be called Solia heterophylla, is now called Bilodera heterophylla. Adjacent to it is Acacia aphylla, the wattle with no proper leaves. Now we start on what we call the bathroom garden. First of all, Kunzea plumifera, just finishing flowering, but it was covered in white flowers, just like covered in snow. Hakea bucculenta. The Bendigo wax, or form of another Hakea bucculenta. Chamalaucium uncinnatum, with a grafted Eremophila behind. Some grafted Grevilleas. So there are two versions of Grevillea petrophylloides, a pink one which is finished flowering, and a white one which has a couple of flowers left. We'll have a closer look at. Some Correas and Philothecas. A couple of birds migrated from the Arctic, so they got a little bit rusty over the winter. Back to some self-sown Grevilleas and Kunzea plumifera, back to the start again. Now we're looking at a recently planted and mulched area. Not much growth in the little eucalypts and hakeas yet. Some acacias as well. Looking forward to that developing over summer and next autumn. Callistum in the background, and then the path leading up the steps towards the front gate. And Carol's paper daisies in the bed with a sand mulch we're trying for the first time. Quite a few more young hakeas in this bed as well. You can probably tell we're quite keen on grevilleas and hakeas. They've grown well since we planted them out in the autumn. Now swinging around back towards the house. With the sand mulch garden on the left and the paper daisies. Callistemon and acacias. And looking down along the house to the most developed part of the garden. I'm now going to walk you through the garden. There's no actual path, so I'm picking my way through the shrubs. Pelargonium austral on the left, naturally growing, shoots up each year. I cut it back. It's done particularly well this year with the extra rainfall. Some Hakea Burrendong beauties, some naturally occurring paper flowers, Eremophila maculata, Indigofera australis was a particularly fine showing of flowers in the spring. And the Pandaria jasminoides, we've left a few dead shrubs and twigs and branches for climbers to grow on and birds to perch on. Looking down at the little grotto area where we have a table and chairs, and back towards the house, and a lovely specimen of Eucalyptus caesia, not the silver princess form though. Now we're moving back to the start of the path along the house, with exotic plants on the left, the garden bed, a lot of salvias, and then on the right is the native garden. So Eremophila nivea there, and the grey flower, the grey leaves. Banksia blacknifolia with a couple of flowers on. Eremophila glabra, orange flowered form. Indigofera australis again. Chamalosia mansonatum. A grass tree, Grevillea Bonniche Prince Charlie on the right, Calothamnus, and then another look at Eucalyptus caesia. And here's a couple of photos taken earlier in spring to show the flowers against the sky. Back to the path, some more exotics on the left. A few pot plants, wisteria over the pergola, and swinging around to the grotto garden, Calithamnus, Grevillea semperflorens, and Pandaria pandarana, white flowered form. Now I've inserted a couple of photos of the Pandaria when it was in flower in spring to show you the dense carpet of white flowers that formed on the ground. Into the grotto, Grevillea alpina growing in the middle of the gravel, Persoonia rigida on the left, swinging around to the rock wall and back along the garden towards the start of the path at the edge of the house. And focusing back towards the house, the bird bath, the Grevillea alpina again, now along the edge of the lawn. You can see the rose there in the distance. Another Grevillea bonaccord. A few correas growing in part shade. A bird feeder, bird bath, lovely mosaic. And swinging around to the trellis where the climbing rose is. If anyone's interested, it's a thornless rose called Smooth Splendour, has a lovely perfume. Then to the traditional veggie garden in the ground, some rhubarb, some pea and bean seeds under the wire netting, some zucchinis, some more rhubarb. Back along the house, under the pergola with the wisteria hanging down. Now I've inserted a couple of photos of the wisteria when it was in flower earlier in spring. And you can see the white flowers of the Pandaria in the background at the start of the grotto garden that we saw earlier. And that back to the pathway along the side of the house that we walked down earlier. Now the exotics are on the right against the house, and the Chamalaucium on the left, looking towards the gate. And that's the end of the tour. Hope you enjoyed it.